All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our May installment of monthly webinars. I'm Daniel. I'm a project manager at Celeritas Digital. And today I want to introduce our esteemed guest, Andrew McInerney, who is the technical director at Natural Stockcare. And
Thanks,
today's going to be,
Daniel.
yeah, it's good to see you. And I'm looking forward to some insight on postbiotic solutions and how they can enhance calf health, growth, and immunity. That's the big topic for today. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about the gut microbiome, something I'm very interested in, but know little about, especially when it comes to uh, animal performance and well-being. So this is going to be a great learning experience, and it's interactive. So if anyone wants to interject or have questions throughout, I think Andrew's pretty good about fielding that. And then after we'll have a conversation. But with that being said, I want to pass the mic over to you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Daniel. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. And for those of you that are watching afterwards, our details will be given out at the end of the presentation as well. So if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me or one of my colleagues. So I guess today's webinar, gut health, growth, and immunity is our topic, and really when we drill down into that a little bit, we'll talk about why postbiotics in the longer term are beneficial strategies for improving gut health and helping growth and immunity in production animals, and specifically in calves for us at the moment. What's interesting about it, I guess, is that Natural Stockcare as a company have been involved in calf nutrition for 40 years now, and really, what we know and what we can see, what the data will always present for us is how gut health, how calf gut health can directly influence productivity and welfare in calves. And I guess the real question that starts from is um why do we see animals that potentially should be really, really good animals that don't live up to that potential? And one of the first stumbling blocks we meet in production and in that side of things is at the calf stage. So when animals are born, if you have 100% of your potential available to you, why do you not achieve that? Or what are the roadblocks that are stopping you or slowing you down from that? And one of the most interesting places, where we look at that is around the microbiome. And I guess there has been a lot of work, certainly in the last 10 years, around the makeup of the microbiome, characterizing the bacteria, the microbes, the protozoa that are present, and how they interact then with, I guess, nutritional functions, performance functions, immune system, because we know that the microbiome is very, very important. And I think if you put a rough figure on it, we say about 70% of an animal's immune system is dictated by what is happening in it with the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome, the saying that having a gut feeling, that's really where these sort of sayings originate, is that your gut can tell you an awful lot, and your gut will tell you, good or bad, how an animal is performing as well. And when high performing animals are looked at, we certainly know that their microbiome looks very, very different to the ones that are underperforming. So I guess the point of this talk has been very much around what we can do. So we'll look at some of the issues, and then we'll look at how we can use postbiotics to try and help that out. So we know that from very late gestation and into early post-parturition, there is a population of microbes in the gut, an early and, I guess, immature microbiome, if you want, for one. And we know then that how that animal is treated, probably through parturition and onwards, plays a huge role in the content and makeup of that microbiome. So again, we'll cover a little bit of that and the diversity of what we look at there, and why, I guess, lifetime performance we feel is predicated by a successful rearing phase. That's really our most important point, that how an animal starts its life has a massive impact on how it can perform in later life. So just maybe to take a quick step back, and my colleague Owen is here with us today. I'll maybe let him give a little bit of an overview into his family business, which Natural Stockcare is, and then pick up again on the technical side. So, Owen.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and good afternoon to everyone, or good evening from Sydney. My name is Owen Ryan, and I'm the managing director of Natural Stockcare. I took over Natural Stockcare a few years ago from my father, Jack Ryan, and I've been raised in Natural Stockcare for most of my life, from shows there like Tullamore Show, where I was working from a young age, to where we are here now. So, yeah, look, we've always been involved in supplementation, probiotics, nutraceuticals, for most of that 40 years. Our head office is in the United Kingdom, in a place called Newcastle. And our passion is for practical and scientifically validated products that focus on sustainability, and market issues such as antimicrobial resistance, and gaps in the market. So, yeah, it's a privilege for us to be here today. And yeah, I'll leave Andrew to get into a bit more detail about science-driven postbiotic strategies for calves.
Thanks very much, Owen. Yeah, so maybe just a little bit about me, just as we start as well. So I am the technical director at Natural Stockcare. I've been with the company for just under 2 years now, and I guess have about 15 years of industry experience, especially around mineral nutrition, calf nutrition, and animal health, as nutrition applies to animal health, working across Europe primarily. So I've in that time worked with feed manufacturers, premix manufacturers, feed additive manufacturers, and I guess even before that, if we take one step further back, I have a strong farming background. I come from a family farm where we were involved in beef farming, and the wider family we're involved in dairy farming as well. And I'm an active farmer myself at the moment also. So we keep some sheep and some beef cattle. I have a degree from UCD in agricultural science, and a master's in dairy nutrition. And I guess my role within Natural Stockcare as technical director is to gatekeep our products, to make sure that our products are well placed, and to collaborate with industry experts, to try to develop new products, and to keep abreast of current research to inform that product development process. So yeah, as Owen mentioned, we're very much passionate about nutritional, how science-driven nutritional interventions can work, and we can improve livestock welfare. So bringing us back around to the topic at hand today, on gut health, and I guess where we look at it from a calf's point of view is very much around, I guess the biggest figure that you can look at is mortality, and we know that in a European context especially, mortality is too high, and when we say too high, we mean that it's ranging somewhere between 5 and 15% on a Europe-wide level. So that's calf mortality in the first 28 days of life, and really it targets on well-run dairy farms, well-run beef farms should be below 1% in mortality. So that's quite a gap, or it can be quite a gap. And one of the biggest things around that, is that when we see a gap like that, we know that there is room for improvement. And that improvement can be multifactorial. There is nutritional, and there's also management issues. So environmental and management issues that we will see on dairy farms will see it. No matter what part of the country, what part of the globe we're in, there are always challenges. They may be slightly different in different places, but I suppose just to call out, in terms of trying to achieve less than 1% mortality, the challenges we look at are really husbandry focused, environmental. So that includes things like climate, hygiene, stocking rate. We look at nutritional management of the animal, but also, I guess, pre-calving or dry cow management, where we look at things like ways to influence colostrum and colostrum quality, mineral status, stress levels, and things like that. Because I think the last quote here comes from the same paper that this diagram is coming from, where the cumulative evidence that perinatal events, so events around parturition, have long-lasting ripple effects throughout the life of livestock, and they do impact future nutritional and management recommendations at farm level. So how we treat that animal, as I mentioned at the very, very beginning, how we treat that animal in the early days of its life have a huge impact on the rest of its life. And just, I picked out this graphic here because really what we're looking at is, our goal when we have a calf born is to turn it from a monogastric, essentially, into a ruminant in a space. And when we stress that animal, we really, really do impact on this development or the potential development that's there. So those stressors, sometimes they're within our control and sometimes they're less so within our control. So things like heat stress can be difficult, but at the same time there are environmental factors around housing and things like that where we can also be effective in minimizing things like stresses, heat stress. So just in terms of what's happening there, we see our focus as a company is around these bioactive compounds, but what I want to make clear here is it's not the only impact. We're a tool in the toolkit. Our products are tools in the toolkit for successful calving and calf rearing. And that's really the most important point that we can make, that this is a whole system that we're trying to evolve, and we're trying to improve all the time. So there's always going to be a limiting factor. The key point, or where the biggest successes on farms will be individual, for where those bottlenecks are occurring at farm level. So in terms of these challenges, we know that enteric disease and poor early nutrition are the main causes. And when we say poor early nutrition, we really do mean colostrum. So that can be, again, twofold. That is colostrum, administration of colostrum, so timeliness of it and quantity of it, but then also maybe more importantly, the quality of the colostrum. And when you drill down into that a little bit more, you can talk about vaccination programs for the dam, and also vaccination programs for the calf themselves. These are all things that will impact on immune system. Optimizing our feeding protocols, so feeding for growth rather than feeding for survival, and that's been quite a major industry change in my time in industry in the last 10-15 years, has been that people have stopped looking at calves purely as a cost and looking at them in terms of their future potential. So feeding for growth and feeding for development. The other point, I guess, that's there really as an industry challenge is around antimicrobial resistance. And when we see illness and sickness in calves, and especially in group housed calves, we know that it can travel quite quickly within a group or a cohort of calves. So there are severe risks to inappropriate antibiotic usage in calves, and that is always a risk where I guess facilities or feeding systems or nutritional management or just your calf immune system is suboptimal. So one of the big questions we have is, how do we build resilience into calves, and so that there is, a reduced need for antibiotic interventions. And one of the things that we really talk about there is the gut microbiome and how it can lead to more robust calves. And when we talk about robust calves, that's calves that grow faster, develop quicker, wean earlier, and then as they grow, they'll breed sooner in their life, they'll produce larger quantities of milk or meat, and they'll, you know, in a dairy context, they'll live longer, or maybe in a beef context, they'll reach their finished state, you know, sooner. So, I guess on top of that, you know, in terms of our industry responsibility, addressing gut health, you know, it's one of the UN sustainability goals around zero hunger, that we try to create sustainable nutritional strategies to reduce antibiotic dependency and environmental impacts, as well as enhancing productivity. So it's a hefty challenge that we have. And I guess early life is our chance, you know, as we look at it, it's a really important chance to look at this gut programming window. So this chance to impact on the gastrointestinal microbiome in the calf. And really that's, from a nutritional point of view, what we can do is we can promote a microbiome that has optimal fermentation characteristics, that has good cellulose degradation, improved fatty acid synthesis, protein and carbohydrate synthesis, and this all improves the nutritional status of the calf. There's also quite a lot we can do from an immune point of view, and quite a lot of this is also controlled by, from a nutritional point of view, by what the gut is experiencing. So how the calf is being fed, you know, what nutrients, what micronutrients are reaching the gut, and how they are interacting with the microbiome that's there already. So we know that we can reduce endotoxins, we can inhibit pathogens to a certain extent, we can improve epithelial cell development, increase immunoglobulin secretion, and lymphocyte regulation can be optimized as well. So this is about developing the innate immune system of calves. So and ultimately that all feeds into us trying to improve the growth, performance, and health status of calves. So that's really where I guess our goals are. And just to give you a little bit more of a view of that, you know, we talk, or we're starting to talk a lot more about metabolic imprinting and the impact that nutrition can have. So I guess the diagram you'll see on the right hand side here, it really talks about, you know, the first 65, 70 days of a calf's life, and what is happening in terms of microbial populations in the gastrointestinal tract. So we know that, I guess, not all of these bacteria are positive, and not all of them are negative, and maybe even deeper than that, not all of them are negative until they reach maybe a certain critical mass. So again, maybe it's a conversation for another day around things like quorum sensing and whatnot, where these bacteria, these microbes, can communicate with each other, and when there are enough of a certain cohort of bacteria, maybe they start to reproduce, or to maybe to attack at a cellular level. So what we really want there is we want to, I guess, improve and optimize the growth of beneficial bacteria in the gastrointestinal tract, and we want to be able to inhibit the pathogenic bacteria. In most cases, we don't really want to eradicate them, but we want to make sure that they're inhibited to the point where they don't have any major negative impact on the animal. So because a lot of these bacteria are sitting there waiting to pounce on a moment of stress, you know, where stress has happened, a stress of any sort, and when they do get their opportunity, they then start to attack and multiply, because, well, that's their raison d'etre. So yeah, that's essentially where we are. So by providing or enhancing the environment in the gastrointestinal tract, we improve the makeup of the microbiome. So I guess that this point leads us nicely on to, I guess, just calling out, you know, that where we are. I guess calves are born with an almost sterile gastrointestinal tract, and gut microbiome colonization begins, you know, from parturition onwards. We know that early microbiome composition can influence immune system development. And we know that imbalanced microbiomes can lead to inflammation and heightened risk of disease, and that can be a lifelong impact. We also know that nutrition can significantly influence the colonization patterns of calves, and we know that calves that have better balanced microbiomes are more resilient and generally have healthier lifelong outcomes. So that is, in short, what we're talking about, or where the challenge is. And for us, BioBalance has been a product that we brought to market just under 2 years ago, that has been formulated as a postbiotic, and is designed to basically improve the environment in the gastrointestinal tract. And what we know, I guess, so far in terms of our journey along with BioBalance is that we know we can support the gut microbiome. We can start to drive tendencies in a positive direction. We see less at farm level, even anecdotally, we see less issues with calves, and we see, I guess, better use of resources. So calves, when they're feeding, they're using less of their resources to fight off the challenges that may be there. So yeah, that is where we are in terms of it. And I suppose it's important. I know at the beginning, Daniel, we had a little conversation around, prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, and I guess just briefly to help people to understand, because I'm aware it's not everybody's morning, noon, and night. So just as an explainer on that, so when we talk about gut health and we talk about non-antibiotic strategies, as a general rule, we will talk about either prebiotics, probiotics, or postbiotics. So, and sometimes it's a combination of them. Prebiotics, as you see in the diagram here, are essentially nourishment for the beneficial bacteria in the gut. I describe them as they're precursors, but they're also food sources. So they can be nutritional, they can be plant extract based, they can be inert, almost inert, but they become a substrate essentially for live bacteria. If that live bacteria has been administered or is coming from an outside source, we talk about them as probiotics. So these probiotics are essentially what we call friendly bacteria. And the easiest analogy I have is that they are factories within the factory of the animal. So the digestive system of the animal is the factory, is the fuel source for the cow in this case. And within that, for her, these bacteria are almost like the refinery. So they are breaking down some nutrients into their core metabolites, especially around fibers. And these metabolites then are what will confer a health benefit onto the animal. Now, postbiotics are a newer, I guess, phase in terms of these types of nutraceutical products. But essentially, a postbiotic is the metabolite of a probiotic. So it's one stage further happening outside of the animal, where a bacteria or a yeast product or some form of probiotic is fermented in an external controlled environment to produce a range of metabolites. And these metabolites, again, in the same way as a probiotic would, are conferring a health benefit on the host. The difference being that when they are fermented outside of the body, we don't call them metabolites anymore. We call them postbiotics. So I guess postbiotics, and why you might ask why there's a benefit to postbiotics over probiotics. The real benefit is around stability and consistency. So because we're no longer dealing with a live organism, a live bacteria or yeast, we have no stability or variability issues because that's all standardized in the fermentation process. And what we have is a concentrated health, set of metabolites, set of postbiotics that can drive health, calf health, gut health especially. And we know that postbiotics can modulate the immune system. They can improve the gastrointestinal tract, the populations within it, and yeah, essentially provide better outcomes for animals. So what do they do? So when we talk about these things that postbiotics can do, I really divide it into 3 areas, intestinal development, rumen development, and immune response. So we know that postbiotics can speed up intestinal development. Okay, so they can enhance the maturation of some of these epithelial cells. They can increase from a rumen point of view, they can increase rumen papillae length and depth. They can also increase the populations of beneficial bacteria because they themselves also form a substrate in their own right. And finally, immune response. And when I say finally, it's probably the biggest point that we can make. But by improving or speeding up immune response, we're able to, I guess, head off challenges sooner. We're also able to have maybe a greater volume of mucus production, mucin production, which allows us an increase in mucosal immunity, and we're seeing lower rates of inflammation. So we see less oxidative stress occurring, so less of the negative impact. So we know that we can promote gut barrier function, and we know that we also establish beneficial microbes more quickly and more readily. So this is, really where postbiotics can play an important role. So what we know within that, again, comes down to, where we've seen in a number of field trials, and I guess I'm just slightly conscious that we haven't, listed out a lot of these field trials here, but they are available for anybody who wants to see them afterwards. I felt, didn't want to bog down too much in this, but the point being that these field trials will always have always shown that we get a consistent improvement in average daily gain of something between 50 to 70 grams per day in calves from an already healthy status. So we're seeing better use of feed. We're seeing that, calf scour, diarrhea is reduced significantly. On average, I think when you see it, it's around a 2 points on a 4-point scale that we see of a reduction in diarrhea. And we're seeing that calves tend to be healthier, and we see lower veterinary interventions. We see improved calf vitality, and that's something that farmers are really, really seeing. They see that these calves seem to have healthier gut, but they have more energy. They're brighter, they're bouncier looking animals. They recover quickly. And the other thing is their resilience. That's another big point that we see. So what we're seeing with long-term farm data, and we're building this up over, I guess, 18 months, 2 years now, is that we're seeing productivity gains. The first animals that would have been introduced to biobalance as calves will be coming into their breeding season this year. And follow up with those farmers has been very, very positive in terms of the number of animals that have reached their targets or their milestones along the way. And a big comment about that will have been that groups stayed more consistent, and you saw less variation, which to me meant that the variation that we were seeing around, especially the microbiome, that was becoming tighter. So more animals were performing as expected. So I suppose where we align, and we talk a little bit about sustainability, but really, what we talk about here is that the opportunity that postbiotics bring is around enhancing growth, supporting immune health, and optimizing efficient production. So we align quite a lot with what our world is demanding of us these days. So supporting agricultural productivity and food security, we're seeing enhances in daily gain and feed efficiency feed efficiency being improved by 15 to 20%. That's quite a significant saving on one of the most intensive times, which is the young animal. Enhanced nutrient uptake, so we're seeing better absorption of those nutrients. So even when we talk about things like waste management, we're seeing more of the nutrients are being retained by the animal and used for growth, development, and performance, and less of it is being excreted. We're seeing, I guess, more resilient or robust calves requiring less antibiotics, which obviously, you know, for all of us that are familiar with the challenges around antimicrobial resistance, being able to use less antibiotics and being able to target them at those animals that need them much more specifically, that's allowing us to start to work towards, I guess, our global goals. Having an improved gut integrity, better immunity, that's all reducing our reliance on antibiotics. We know that our immune function of calves has been clearly identified, you know, where we see reductions in inflammatory markers, such as interleukin-6 and TNF alpha, where we're seeing reductions by about 20%. So that's less inflammation. And when you see less inflammation in the gut, you see less leaky gut, you see less opportunity for these opportunistic pathogens that we mentioned earlier in the talk to actually strike. We talk about sustainable calf rearing, feed conversion ratios, and the uniformity of growth, as I mentioned. I think that's a really, really big thing, because on farms today, we're seeing more and more where labor is an issue. And when you have animals that you see large variations in the cohorts, they then require different management. So when that happens, that means it takes more effort, more time, more labor to manage those animals properly, and generally more resources just to get them all to their targets. So I guess if I was to sum that up, I'd say healthier calves require fewer treatments, they grow better, and they perform better as adults. So just as we kind of finish up a little bit on this, I suppose we talk a little bit about future direction, and I guess for using our product, BioBalance, we talk about farm-specific integration. Although we have quite a standardized administration protocol where we use the product for about 28 days, the first 28 days of a calf's life. What's important around that is that, you know, staff are trained, farmers understand what's happening, and that veterinarians are in a position to recommend these types of prophylactic treatments, so that they will responsibly reduce antibiotic usage at farm level. So in doing that, I guess we're constantly trying to we're constantly collaborating with some of the research institutes where this fundamental work has taken place, to try and drive further knowledge, further understandings and learnings from trial work of what's actually happening at calf level, and how we can intervene even more effectively, because one of the newer developments we have is very much around targeted supplementation where stress events are predicted. And you know, this is part of, I guess, where we look at things like machine learning and those sorts of things, where we being able to predict these stress events means that we could go potentially and reinforce a calf's immune system before a stress event, so that that animal is then, you know, better able to naturally carry itself through that. Yeah, so that's very much where we are. And what we see from that, I guess, you know, economically, and again, I haven't put a whole lot of figures on it, but I will talk a little bit about them here now. We look at the economic benefit of using BioBalance, even from a very, very simplistic additional weight gain versus the cost of treatment. The product is essentially offering somewhere between 1.5 and 2 to 1 return on investment. Then when you layer on, I guess, the health benefits on top of that, And when we talk about replacement dairy heifer calves, um, there's some very, very good work that shows that each additional illness in the first 4 months of a calf's life will cost around 200 kilos of milk in that animal's first lactation. So on average, that animal will produce less milk in its first lactation if it has been sick in the first 4 months. If it has been sick a second time, it'll be another 200 kilos. So when we produce these resilient calves, we are essentially starting to invest in an insurance policy for those animals to be able to produce well for the rest of their lives. Um, on the more positive side of that, I guess what we talk about are the additional growth rate and how that actually materializes into lifetime production. And we know that calves that grow between 50 and 100 grams per day faster in their first 8 weeks of life, we know that they produce anywhere from 106 to 258 kilos of extra milk in their first lactation. We also know that they're 50% more likely to still be in the herd after their fourth lactation. And when you look at, I guess, most international economic analysis will say that it takes at least 2 lactations for a cow to have covered the cost of her rearing phase. So basically, for a cow to be profitable, they need to last more than 2 lactations. So anything we can do to keep keep cows milking for longer means that we need less replacements. We can produce maybe more beef from the dairy herd, and we can, I guess, ensure more productive and more profitable farms. So that's really where where implementations at farm level, um, that's where they sit. You know, that we can improve the health of calves, reduce antibiotic resistance, and produce more productive animals in the long term. Um, what you see here is maybe just a snapshot of some of the farmers who have used it originally, and really what we talk about and what has been fed back to us is the robustness of the calves. Those those calves have been more robust. They have and one that I find very heartening, I guess, is that um, farmers accept that the sicknesses will still happen. You know, they'll still challenges will still occur at farm level, but what they're finding is that whereas in the past a lot of calves may have stopped drinking, become recumbent, they're now continuing to feed, and by continuing to feed, you know, it's very rarely the pathogen that kills the calf, it's more often the dehydration. And calves that continue to feed, you know, they're less likely to get dehydrated, and they're more likely to be able to survive for long enough for their own immune system to negate the pathogen. So I think that's a really, really strong message. Um, and yeah, if there was one message to leave, that would be it. So I would say thank you very much for your time. I hope people have, maybe we've stimulated some thought. I think that's probably the most important thing, and maybe some questions around it. And if anybody does, please feel free to shout now or to follow up. I guess, as I said earlier, all our details will be available.
Yeah, I don't want to hog the mic on all the questions here, but I think I have a few. Hopefully
Yep.
they're decent questions. Uh, there's one thing that you mentioned towards the end that I thought was really interesting about machine learning being used to predict stress
Mhm.
events. I'm curious if you have any more details about that, like how that's being used to predict stress events, how it's being used to prevent stress events.
So a lot of what's being done at the moment is being done in the monogastric area. So
Mhm.
it's been done in poultry and swine, um, where I guess there's a lot of cameras set up that are watching the natural behaviors of animals and starting to use that to understand when issues are happening, and they can be from very simple things like you know, ventilation or drafts in houses, that there are natural warm or cold spots, or you know, wet spots in houses, or um things like that. And then there are also, you know, something that, while it might sound very basic, but you know, when you're watching a cow house, you're watching lying times, you're watching chewing and rumination, and I guess that's where machine learning has very much looked at, rumination and things like that. And I guess going forward from here, it's going to be how we can capture that in calves as well. So not just feeding behavior, where we are at the moment is a lot of it is around feeding behavior, but also environmental factors. So what are what are the things that we can look at for early interventions? Um, and there's quite an interesting group in Hungary looking at predictors of illness and how you can predict through behavior what animals are likely to be ill, and they've actually in monogastrics looked at it in terms of being able to measure the success of various feed additives and things like that to look at how they can deal with it. So yeah, it's a very interesting area, machine learning. There's some parts I would say are very, very much more developed, and they're very much focused on the production animal when they're producing. I think where we're looking, or where we're trying to drive that is to come back into earlier life to predict these stress events and be able to support those animals ahead of it.
Yeah. And what's that Hungarian company's name?
Oh God, you've got me on the hop now, but I will follow up, Daniel,
Yeah,
with it.
I can probably like do a little
There's a
research on
couple.
that.
There are several companies globally who are looking at this. They're just the ones we've interacted with, but there are several. Yeah.
Okay. And then I know you're the important takeaway from this from the start is about early intervention and how those first 4 to 6 weeks are
Yeah. I think for us, and it maybe leads on from the first question, early intervention at the moment for us is a blanket intervention from day one.
right.
What we'd like to be able to do is, we know that we can enhance the immune system by getting in early. But there are other opportunities throughout that animal's life where stress events are going to happen. So maybe that's group changes, or maybe that's vaccinations, or maybe it's different things like that. And it's how we can find a way to support those animals ahead of that. And that can be, even we know that animals that are stressed, the uptake of vaccines is diminished by the stress that's already there within the animals. So it's not just reducing the effect of stress, but maybe it's reducing the negative impacts that stress can bring across a broader, talk about effectiveness of vaccination or things like that, for example.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that it had that wide a range of effects. And so this seems like this is just step one in a really holistic kind of approach to achieving that less than 1% morbidity rate. But so I think you said that one of the big benefits of probiotics like BioBalance is there's a kind of predictable, there's a consistent, yeah, you use the word, there's a consistent kind of effect that you're looking at. So and it's yeah, it's usually consistent and more measurable. And so I'm wondering if that means that the dosing is always the same, if you're always administering this to young calves, or if there's some that you determine won't be needing it. Like how's that determined?
So um we've had a variation of questions around that, and could I feed twice as much for half as long, or half as much for twice as long, or will I get away if cows are healthy originally? And all of the data, all of the research that's there, we show that we're getting a pretty linear effect. So relative to body weight, the longer you're feeding it, the better. Where our recommendations around 28 days, or the first month of life approximately, are very much around where the challenges are. So we know that things like, E. coli, Salmonella, Cryptosporidium, they're very much present in that first 14, 21 days of life. And if they don't take hold at that stage, generally the innate immune system has enough resilience built into it that it can fight them off when they become older animals. So it's trying to get them through that first risk period. that's where our focus has been initially, and I suppose what I've alluded to there is where potentially we can go to longer term, because obviously we know that, you know, immune systems are challenged in all animals at various different times, whether that's, you know, weather events or, you know, it could be a social event. It does, you know, there's lots of issues around that.
Yeah. And I also appreciated the point you brought up about and also someone stop me if anyone else has a question. I'm kind of hogging this, but yeah.
I have two questions
Oh yeah.
when you're whenever ready, Daniel.
You
Sure,
go.
Colin.
Sorry, Andrew. I think you kind of answered my first question there in and around the specific. You mentioned reduction in pathogens, and I was just wondering
Yeah.
if you've seen any reductions in specific pathogens. You know, sorry, you mentioned reduction
Yeah.
in scouring, and I was just
Yeah.
wondering if you've seen specific
So I
pathogens.
suppose, yeah, Colin, it's a good question. So what we've seen when I talk about reductions of diarrhea or scouring, we've seen improved stool, basically, you know, stool quality. So that has been very much an indication that there is less issue going on at gut level. When we've gone and tested that feces, and we've tested at level, we've shown that, and there are actually some challenge studies that will show us as well that we've reduced E. coli, we've reduced salmonella, we've reduced cryptosporidium. So yeah, we are seeing those actual numerical reductions. Um, and a big thing is, it's one thing to inhibit the actual microbe, the actual pathogen itself. The bigger thing is to reduce shedding. And so what we definitely are seeing is that we're reducing pathogen shedding, and that means that, you know, subsequent cohorts that are maybe going through the same housing, they're not they're not as likely to see. So obviously, coming from Ireland, the same as yourself, Colin, we've
Yeah,
quite a lot of pressure on housing in the springtime, especially. Um, and that pressure, you know, it gets bigger, I would say, after St. Patrick's Day, and it's not related to the festival, but it is very much around, you know, calving typically starts in Ireland maybe the end of January. And by the time we get to the middle of March, 6 weeks after the start of calving, we're at our peak, and disease pressure is starting to rise in those houses. So what a lot of farmers will have always observed is that they see more incidents of diarrhea, they see more coronavirus, rotavirus, cryptosporidium. Um, they're building because the calves that were there earlier, that a farmer may have perceived didn't have a challenge, but what they didn't have was, they didn't have a challenge that was significant enough, but they were shedding, and that disease pressure was building. And then those subsequent or later calves, they're the ones who are dealing with this high disease pressure environment. So by using something like BioBalance, you are reducing that shedding and reducing that pressure for those subsequent groups coming through.
yeah. Sorry, and then my next question, and you just mentioned in and around the longer term
Yeah.
studies, you know, and I know it's always ongoing and maybe it's a little bit academic, but in terms of, have you looked at where they are, or do you intend to look at if there's been any long term impact on the microbiome?
Yeah, so we're not there yet. I guess certainly what we've looked at has been very much on how it has impacted the calf microbiome. We haven't looked at adult microbiomes, no.
Yeah,
It's one of those where um, I'd be scared to find out what the cost of something like that would be, to be perfectly honest. To try to get adult animals followed through from birth through to adult, and then have them slaughtered to examine a microbiome is a pretty big ask, you know.
yeah,
I would
yeah.
say,
No, no, it's a fair point, and as you say, yeah,
it's
it's the
a very
controlling.
interesting thing, and I hope some academic is tuning in here somewhere, and is able
Yeah,
to will happily work with them on funding it, but it's a big ask, certainly, yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, that's fine.
It's a very interesting area, something we'd love to see. We've seen it in performance, but um, we also know, you know, that it's a movable feast. You know, the microbiome, it doesn't stay the same throughout an animal's life, but it also won't stay the same in different treatment, in different environments, even
Yeah.
at different times of year. So, yeah, it's going to be, that would be quite a difficult one to get our teeth into, I think.
Yeah. No, that's fine. No, that was it. Thank you.
That's good. Thanks.
And maybe I have one more before we end this, but I will put all of your info in the chat right now. And then we're of course gonna put this info in all of the flyers that we send out, the description for the restream we do of this on YouTube. And but with that being said, I wanted to say how in the beginning I came to you saying I have no clue what postbiotics are. I'm not even certain what prebiotics are. I just know my favorite probiotic kombucha, and I don't know that that counts. But you really helped kind of educate me on this, and I wanted to know if that's something that you're pursuing with BioBalance in general. Is the kind of educational side of this and how other people in your industry are taking to it?
Yeah, I think we've been quite deliberate since the start. I think I would say when we started, and maybe it's the enthusiasm of knowing, you know, we felt we had a really, really good product, but I guess we threw quite a lot of information out there at quite a high level. So there's quite a lot of papers shared, and um, I guess if you go back, there are in the area, you know, specific to our product, you know, we've over 20 peer-reviewed papers available, where our fermentation product has been used, on calves specifically, but wider than that, there's around 400 papers published. So it's coming with a strong body of evidence, and sometimes when you have that, it's quite tempting to just push that out there and try and get that out in front of people, and that's great maybe for a certain group, but what we have to remember for ourselves is that our target customer, our target, the person where the biggest impact is a farmer, and what they want to see are real world things. That they're not worried about whether um you know, the microbiome has shifted 5% left or right. They want to see, you know, the things that I've mentioned there: healthier calves, happier calves, giddy, you know, the full eyes, clear coats, things like that, that are perceptible. They can see them with their own eye, and that message has been, I think we're still refining it. We'll always be refining it, really, you know, but it needs to be as simple as possible, with the details backing it up behind it. And I think it's, I would definitely call it a knowledge transfer job, because we're not, I think that's the world we're in now, where people want to understand, they need to understand a little bit about what's happening, um, and enough to give them confidence, because um, you know, there are a lot of products out there where maybe they're sold or missold on how you use them, or maybe not, you're not telling people why they're working, so they don't understand how best to use them. So this is why I talk about, you know, postbiotics and having a role around, you know, modulating the immune system much more than, you know, where initially we might have leaned on things like the diarrhea incidents. But we found that farmers maybe will have turned around and go, well, I'll use this to cure diarrhea, but that's, it might be a side effect that you see less diarrhea, but what you've done is you've improved the gut microbiome, and in so doing, you're giving a little bit more opportunity, for calves to have less scour. So yeah, the message is really important, how you message it, and I think, yeah, as I say, we're getting better at that, and experience brings us along in that quite a way as well, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think between this presentation and the website and some of the graphics you have for the for BioBalance online, I think that it's all like really consistent, really easy to understand.
The explainer where you have your prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic, I think that's the most important message that we have, because I think even at one stage, it's very easy to use those words interchangeably, and maybe people think they're all the same things, but they're not. And like the message I would say, not for 1 second am I saying the probiotics are not important or not useful. But I would very much have a feeling that if I want something to happen, in the rumen, I need a combination maybe of a prebiotic and a probiotic, or if I want something to happen a little bit further down along the gastrointestinal tract, I probably want a postbiotic to be doing that for me, because I'm not relying on what is a variable system.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. If there's no other questions, we're at the top of the hour. That was a great conversation. I truly appreciate it. I think with that, we wrap it up.
Thank you very much. Much
you.
appreciated, Daniel.
Yeah, it's great to meet
Thank you to Celertis for accommodating us.
Of course. And
That's
Owen,
it.
nice to meet you as well. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Cheers. Take care.